Welcome back to another installment of our question and answer sessions. It's my great pleasure to be joined by Devi Ma today. And if you enjoy this question and answer session and you'd like to get more involved with the ashram online, you can check us out at www.satsanglive.com.au. Also, Swamiji's spiritual memoir, Ganesh Puri Days, is now available worldwide in both digital format and print on demand. If you want to know where you can purchase the book, you can visit ganeshpuridays.com for all of the information. Welcome, Devi Ma.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Great to be with you again.
And if during the course of our question and answer session today, you have questions that you'd like answered, don't forget to write them in the comment box below, and we'll get them to Devi Ma. So today I want to talk a bit about your history, the way you came to this lineage. And I know that you originally had some involvement in social justice issues that led you to a path of psychological study and then finally sadhana. And when I'm reflecting on that, I saw that there was this kind of interconnectivity because they all deal with the human condition and how we suffer. Can you talk a bit about those three things?
Yeah, I mean, in the late 60s, early 70s, I was working for the Company of Young Canadians, which was not a political, it was a government-funded grassroots program to help unemployed youth who were traveling across Canada and had trouble finding jobs. And so we set up a hostel accommodation for them. And then when the funding ran out, they were kicked out, basically, and had nowhere to go again. So we decided that we would protest. And the kids sat on the road, and then the mayor of Vancouver called in what's similar to the National Guard, the police actually, to get them off the road. And they were, dressed up in what looked to me like war attire. I was up on a hill. I had come late that day and watching the scene as the police came towards the kids to get them up off the road. And I was horrified because I could see that they had their billy clubs out and they were going to beat them if they didn't get up, and it was mass confusion, and there was, the feeling of violence and pain and confusion and, whatever. And it was in that moment I looked out and I thought, oh my gosh, politics is good, but it's not for me. I don't want to live in this state of fear, anger, and hostility and violence. There has to be another way. And two of the people I worked with put me in touch with a Gestalt trainer. And from then I met him. I went and met him, and he invited me to some groups, Gestalt groups he was running, and that was my beginning of a relationship with him in terms of him becoming my mentor in psychology. And so he went to Italy to set up an institute, and I followed him there and became he trained me, and I became a group leader. And through that, I began to get a better, deeper understanding of who I was and what was in the way. I mean, I was plagued by a kind of existential angst and wanted to discover what that issue truly was, because nothing seemed to calm it or lessen it. And so I had great experiences there, and it was lessened, but it wasn't really lessened until my spiritual journey began when I met Baba Muktananda in Ann Arbor in 1974 when he visited there, and I had my first experience of the inner self, and then met Swamiji, and then the rest is history. And so I think there is a movement, if you're a seeker perhaps from a sense of injustice to, looking for answers and hoping to be able to solve them by means in the outer world, But when that becomes frustrating, you'll start to look within. And I was looking within, but didn't have a solution yet. But by God's grace, I was led in the right direction. I was grateful that Peter was such a good man. And, that led me to Baba and Swamiji.
And it seems to me like that at the heart of your journey, you were always being motivated by the desire to serve other people.
Well, I wanted to do something. Yeah, I wanted my life to have meaning and purpose. Nothing seemed to, no material thing or outer world thing seemed to, as I said, help my existential angst. It didn't go deep enough into my psyche. It seemed too superficial. And so I wouldn't stop looking until, I couldn't stop looking. I mean, I was propelled until I found the thing that, calmed that restlessness of spirit and hunger for something more meaningful. And that happened when I got Shaktipat at the first intensive that Swamiji held in Ann Arbor.
And at the heart of your sadhana, I mean, you're Swamiji's most senior devotee. Can you talk about what entering into a guru-disciple relationship brought forth in you? What devotion did for you?
Well, Shaktipat was, was a miracle to me. I mean, I couldn't imagine, that such a thing existed, a total transformation of being that happened in a split second. And I knew nothing about yoga or meditation or gurus or anything. And it was such a surprise. And that gift I felt incredibly grateful for. And so in that moment, what I wanted to do was I wanted to serve. That's when it really took, because, working with the unemployed youth, that was service. Right. But it didn't have this feeling of true love, which is what Shaktipat brought up in me, was a kind of devotion, which is different than loving someone. It's a commitment, it's a purpose, it's a way of being and holding to those things which are truly important. And so, I wanted to serve. I wanted to say thank you for this miracle. Thank you for that.
Last year in Ganesh Puri, when Swamiji gave out certain initiations into the lineage, he gave a beautiful speech where he talked about initiation as this process of going from being a consumer of these practices in this lineage to being a custodian of it. Can you talk about what it means to be a custodian for these practices in this lineage?
Yeah, I thought that was a beautiful thing to say, because in the beginning, and I suppose even I was a consumer because I was looking for something to fix me, to fix this pain. And so, but the moment it was fixed, I wasn't a consumer. I was somehow fixed, even though I had stuff to go through. So I think every seeker who comes into the company of a great being or a guru has something they want. And, they're frantically wanting until something happens where they have a shift and they go from thinking about themselves to giving that up, because that causes so much pain. Self-concern causes suffering. And so when you give up your self-concern, you give up your suffering, and then you become not a consumer. You become a guardian of the lineage or a guardian of the teachings, where you want to share it, you want to serve in any way you can, and you want to give back what you've received somehow, in some small way. And I made a commitment, in that moment, that I would serve the guru no matter what. That was my highest duty, my highest thank you, my highest goal, I suppose.
What I think is really fascinating is that both therapists and gurus, they hold this vision of us as our higher self until we're ready to hold that vision ourselves. Yeah,
and the guru probably holds it because the guru should be established in that vision.
Right.
So unless you're established in it, you can't hold it if you can't hold it for yourself, you can't hold it for anyone. So, through good times, bad times, happy times, sad times, the guru is holding that place and never deviates from it.
Because they are holding that space for us, that place, that vision for us. Would you say the guru-disciple relationship is a relationship of equals?
Well, it's not equal in the beginning. I mean, it's like a client of a therapist. There's a transference that happens when you go to learn. When you're a student, you're learning. And in that learning, there's an inequality. Even though, in essence, the guru never sees the disciple as less than. Never. Because if they do that, that means there's something not true in their attainment.
Right.
So it appears only to be an inequality because a disciple or a seeker comes confused and feeling a lack of something. And that lack in itself is an inequality because the guru is full and doesn't lack. The only thing a real guru needs is an audience, to share their state of consciousness. And so when the audience comes, the right audience, then the guru flourishes and everybody around the guru flourishes.
Yeah, Baba talked a lot about disciples' grace. Is that
That's
what
right.
you mean?
Disciples' grace is everything, really, because a guru can be giving grace and teachings and everything, but if the listener isn't willing to hear and accept, then everything's falling on deaf ears. So for us, it's always to be, as a student of the divine or a student of the holy, we have to remain open and with a positive attitude, because growth never stops. Learning never stops. Understanding never stops. There's always something new to understand, experience, and learn from.
When you initially began your journey as a sadhaka, as like a spiritual seeker, you apprenticed yourself in a way to Baba Muktananda. He was what you call your root guru. And then over time, it became clear that Swamiji was your guru. Could you talk about that movement?
Well, that was a natural movement because, when I first met Baba and I had that profound experience of the self, that state was such a rare thing, I thought. And then I had that same experience at the intensive, which Swamiji held. So I considered them to be one because of that state of consciousness. Because I went to the same place deep within me where I felt connected, at one with, and at peace with. I had inner peace and love and joy, real joy for the first time. And that grew over the years. And so I considered them as one. It was never a problem for me, my relationship with Baba. I loved Baba deeply and was eternally grateful to him for many reasons. And, it was never a problem. They were always one for me.
Do you think, you mentioned before that your favorite G statement or like uplifting statement is this idea that this is all me. Can you unpack that a bit for us and maybe what that means in the context of being with the guru? Yeah.
Well, it means that whatever thoughts and feelings arise within the mind, your own mind, are all arising from you or me. And it's so, it's less about the stories we tell ourselves about all the objects out there, including people. So in our interactions with people, if there were no people, there would be no problem, except that we'd probably be lonely and have to create problems for ourselves, So all of our responses and reactions and difficulties or whatever, love and everything, is arising from within me. Now, I think this is hard for Westerners to understand because we've been educated by the culture or trained by the culture to be in this sort of relationship with others that, we have to take responsibility, but taking responsibility is taking responsibility for your own inner state and getting rid of it and not trying to push responsibility onto others for your happiness, for what you want, for what you expect. And, we have so many hidden expectations within us and are unconscious about when we enter into relationships with others. And truthfully, others will always disappoint our expectations because it's a fantasy. So we have to take responsibility for our fantasies in a way and get rid of them. What we hope for, what we wish for, all the great beings say is contained in the self. And it's not a narcissistic thing, because I think that point of view actually, when we really get to that place of understanding that all this is me, whatever is in me is mine, is me, whether it's good or bad, ugly or beautiful, it doesn't matter. They're just thoughts and feelings, and they're ephemeral. And they don't stay very long with us. And if we can see how the impermanence of that, then we're free, and then our love begins to flow. And I mean, Swamiji's, one of Swamiji's great statements is first learn to love yourself and then give that love to everyone. And we can only do that when we're taking responsibility for the condition of our inner world. That's the most important thing in life, not just in spiritual life, in life, period. Even if you don't want a guru, which is fine, at least we have to learn to take responsibility for the condition of our inner world. And know that everything that arises only comes from within. Doesn't come from something somewhere outside.
On the one hand, we have this wonderful G statement of like, this is all me, and taking responsibility for our inner world. But yoga also seems to be very big on this idea of renunciation. Can you talk about?
I love it. Renunciation goes with this, because it means that you have to give up thoughts that hurt you, and thoughts that want to attack others. So that's a renunciation. To renounce, in my mind, is not to renounce, having a car or having a house or doing all that. Although that could be in the way of your spiritual life, but mostly it isn't. It's about holding on to grudges, and holding on to negative emotions. So if we renounce our grudges towards others, that we didn't get what we wanted, or we didn't have what we didn't get appreciated, or whatever it is, all the stuff that the mind wants, then, we renounce that. Then we're free. We're free from the feeling of limitation and contraction that comes with negative thinking. And that's what we want to get rid of. We want to get rid of what Swamiji calls tearing thoughts. We want to get rid of attacking ourselves and hating ourselves and self-concern. When we get rid of that, then all this is me comes naturally.
It sounds like a commitment to a clear inner space. And can you talk a bit about how do we hold on to that clear space of good feeling when the world is so filled with conflict, when there is so much injustice?
That's the problem. I mean, that was my issue when I went from politics to psychology to spirituality. I think it's a matter of going deeper within yourself and finding, I couldn't have done it without a teacher. So I think finding a teacher who's established in that state of holding that space is really probably the easiest way. Because the mind is incredibly tricky, and your mind will trick you into believing things that aren't necessarily the whole truth. And so in order to know the whole truth, you have to know your own self. And it's only in that way that can we attain that state of peace and oneness within ourselves. I feel very blessed that I met I've been very fortunate in my life, I've had great teachers, great mentors, great support, great help to attain a goal of what I feel is free of negative emotion chronically. Even though I had a profound Shaktipat experience, my mind and my thoughts and feelings, my feelings were a terrible, terrible problem for me, because they were powerful and I believed everything they told me in the beginning. But over the years, I've learned not to believe what my feelings tell me, except that which takes me close to the self. So that's the most important thing.
I think society.
Am I answering your question?
You are, yeah. I think society
No,
would look a lot differently if at some point during our development someone sat us down and said, everything you think isn't always going to be true or accurate, or you don't have to believe your
Don't
thoughts.
believe everything you feel. Whatever you, especially if you're a woman, don't believe everything you feel, because half the time your feelings are not going to be telling you the truth. They're going to be bullshitting you. This is from firsthand experience. I know this. So don't believe the feelings that make you feel bad about yourself. Yes.
For my last question, I guess I want to piggyback off of this. Would you say that the goddess is a feminist?
No, I would say the goddess is ruthless, because the Shakti wants to get rid of every possible attachment we might have, and especially those attachments that we cherish and hold so dear that are actually in the way of attaining something great, of fulfilling our potential. No, she'll get rid of anything and everything that stands in the way of what she wants for you, what your higher self wants for you. I mean, I've had things ripped away that I didn't want ripped away. Anything. So you just have to go through it and have faith, actually, that whatever spiritual process we're undergoing at any given time is divine. And if we think about it from a material point of view, I've lost this, I've lost that, but I mean, there are things that are incredibly, as I've said before, painful to deal with. Illness, death, betrayal. They're very hurtful things that we have to live through. And from a spiritual point of view, the Shakti is clearing away things that cause us suffering, even though we may believe they make us happy. And what we think makes us happy, what the guru thinks will make us happy, what the Shakti thinks will make us happy, is very different from what the ego thinks will make us happy.
So if I'm hearing it correctly, it sounds like our self-image is maybe one of the biggest obstacles we have to self-knowledge.
Oh, self-image is yeah. I took the forum quite a few years ago, and one of the first thing he said is, being concerned about what other people think of you. So it's a great, the person in us wants people to love us and accept us and, recognize us and adore us and, think we're the greatest. But that's rare. It's important that we learn to love ourselves, not from the ego's point of view, but from essence, in our essence. Does that answer your question?
It does,
I don't know what I'm doing.
In this lineage, the way that we access the essence is, meditation. And so I was wondering if you would close things out by guiding us into a brief meditation.
Sure. Well, I think probably, as Nataraj said in the beginning, that my favorite G statement or great statement, contemplation, is all this is me, because when we can feel, if you close your eyes and turn within and let the mind settle, you'll start to be able to see that whatever is arising is nothing but your own consciousness. So I'll give you a few statements to say into your inner space, and then we can just meditate for a few minutes. Swami Muktananda's one of his favorite G statements was, everything is consciousness. Or consciousness is everything. And that defines the relationship between the individual and the absolute. The absolute is nothing but consciousness, and the individual is also that consciousness. So one thing to put in the space of consciousness is that these are my thoughts and feelings. All these thoughts and feelings arise within me. And as Swamiji says, you are your awareness. The self is awareness. And when awareness observes the flow of thought and feeling within, then it can just be aware that all this is me. All this is my own self. All this is the self of all. So we'll sit for a few minutes. And if your mind starts to wander down wormholes, you can just remember that all this is me. Okay, we'll slowly come back to wherever we are. And I just want to say that making contact with the self beyond what the mind is telling us in any given moment is enough, even if it's just for a split second. It's enough to change your inner space from one of feeling separate or contracted to one of feeling open and expanded. So make contact with yourself. Make it a habit. Do it all day long.
And if you'd like more support on your journey of making contact, there are plenty of resources available at www.satsanglive.com.au. There's a whole library of live streaming programs and on-demand things that you can watch. And Swamiji's spiritual memoir, Ganesh Puri Days, is an excellent resource for any seeker on the path. It's a beautiful love story of guru and disciple. And it's available worldwide. So you can check out more information on that on ganeshpuridays.com. And we'll see you next time. Thank you for being with us, Devi Ma.
It's a pleasure. Thank you all. See you in 2 weeks.